Hello everyone and welcome to the lecture series on ARM microcontroller and embedded systems. So today we are doing module number 3, lecture number 29. Myself, Professor Rohini Kallu, working as Assistant Professor in the Department of EMC, KLS VDIT, Halia. Lecture, we have learned about the off-board communication interfaces. The off-board communication interfaces included the RS-232 cables, the USB cables, the Bluetooth module, Zigbee module, Wi-Fi module, the infrared modules as well as Zigbee modules, and we have also seen what is called as GPRS also. Okay, so today in the today's lecture we'll be covering the last topic of the module, that is embedded firmware and other system components. So we'll be dealing with the requirements of the embedded firmware and also the other system requirements what we need in the embedded system to make that embedded system work smoothly. Okay. So embedded firmware is a device or is a part of the embedded system. Embedded hardware is a muscle of the system or muscle of the embedded system. So this will be the brain of the embedded system. So embedded firmware refers to the control algorithm and the configuration settings of the embedded system. So the developer will be dumping the code onto the embedded system. This is an unavoidable part of the embedded system. As I said, this is like the brain of the embedded system. So here you will be loading in all the intelligence what is required for an embedded system. So there are different methods through which you can load in the embedded firmware. So you'll write a program in the high level language like embedded C or C++ and then integrate it using the IDE. Or you can also write a program in the assembly language and then dump it onto the application's target processor. Okay. So similarly, the embedded firmware, the program written in high language or assembly language should be converted into the processor understandable language before you load it into the program memory. So the process of converting the program into a machine understandable language is called as hex file creation, and this hex file creation is done and via which the hex file will be loaded into the processor's embedded system. So for the beginner embedded system, from the beginner's point of view, they recommend high level language because it is a easy language. It can be written easily, it can be understood easily, and it can be debugged easily. This is tedious, it's time consuming because you need to be knowing all the instruction set, all the processors and all the devices whatever are connected in the processor board, and also you need to be knowing about the different and addressing modes what are required to write the program. And it is very difficult for the second person to understand your code because comments if you write in your program is well and good. If you don't write the comments, then understanding the logic becomes a tedious task. So two types of control algorithm design exist in the embedded firmware development. First one is it's called super loop approach. What happens is you will be executing the task continuously. So we use a while within braces one condition like that. So it will be always true. And the second is you will be splitting the task into the multiple subtasks, and those subtasks will be executed by the scheduler, or scheduler will schedule them and then you will be executing them on a real-time OS. So that is what is about embedded firmware. Next we have something called as other system components. That means after we have a system core, input, output, resources, communication interface and all, what else I need to make my embedded function system function smoothly. So here what we need is the other system components refer to the components which are necessary for the proper functioning of the embedded system. So some of these circuits may be essential for functioning of the processor or and a firmware execution. So it uses a watchdog timer, a reset IC, brownout circuit protection, and so on. These devices, it may be a system on chip or it might be a configured device or assembled device which is used for the proper functioning of the embedded system. So the first one is reset circuitry. Reset circuitry is required because in case of unwanted system has got hang up or the embedded system has got hang up. In that particular case, we want a specified location to be or specified action to be taken on that embedded system, so that on pressing a button or on pressing a reset signal, we can either directly come to a known place instead of an unknown place. So the reset signal brings the internal registers and a different system hardware to a known state and starts the firmware execution from a reset vector. And the reset vector is normally 0000 for the conventional processors. And it can be active high or it can be active low. We can program this. Since the processor operation is synchronized to a clock signal, the reset pulse should be wide enough to give time to the clock oscillator to stabilize before it terminate your internal reset state. So reset signal to the processor can be applied at a power on through the external passive reset circuitry. It consists of say capacitor and a resistor, or it will be having a reset IC like MAX 810 from the Max Impedance. Select the next what we'll do, we'll select the reset IC based on the type of a reset signal we want. Whether we want a CMOS signal, whether we want a TTL signal, depending upon that it will be selected. Some microprocessors or some controllers, they have built-in internal reset circuitry and they don't require any external reset circuitry. So this is what is a reset circuitry. This will give us a reset circuitry, reset pulse which is active high. This is will give us a reset circuitry which are reset pulse active low. So here what happens is when the power supply is on, the current passes and the current will flow through the capacitor. Okay, and once this signal is applied, so the capacitor and then the resistor, then what happens, it will be continuously flowing. We don't want, or whenever we want the reset signal to be applied, at that time the capacitor will discharge. When the capacitor discharges, it will be having higher polarity, so signal 1. Freewheeling diode is required. Freewheeling diode is required to eliminate all the negative current, or whenever the capacitor is discharging, the discharging through this one. So if there is extra current, that can be withdrawn using this diode. So this is called a freewheeling diode. Then what happens here is the resistance is applied and the current will be flowing through the resistor and the capacitor, and the capacitor goes on charging. At one particular point when we want to apply the reset pulse, the capacitor when it is charged completely, it will discharge and it discharges with a polarity called as ground, that is low. Again, the freewheeling diode is used to take away the unwanted negative current or unwanted the current whatever is flowing in the circuitry because of the discharge of the capacitor. Then the next type of device is brownout protection circuit. This is a circuit which prevents a processor or a controller from unexpected program execution behavior when the voltage is low than the specified voltage. So in case of battery powered devices, what happens is the battery may discharge very soon. In that, because of which what happens is the embedded system may function differently than what is being programmed. It may so happen that the data may be lost in the device, or the data whatever is stored in the device may be lost, or it may be reaching someone which is unwilling. Okay, so when you don't want the data to be lost, or when you don't want the data to be shared to a person who is not at all connected to this particular embedded system, you need to be using a brownout protection circuit. In brownout protection circuit, what happens is the circuit holds the processor or a controller in a reset state. Then it operates at a voltage which is less than the threshold. Okay, and until it rises to the next one, the voltage will be held at that particular value only. In certain processors or controllers, the built-in brownout protection circuit which monitors the supply voltage internally. So what happens here is some of the embedded systems they'll be having the built-in circuitry or built-in brownout circuitry, or some we need to interface. So this is what is a circuitry. Here what happens is voltage is applied and we have a transistor is R1, R2 and then R3. Whenever the voltage, whenever the current flows through this, the current will be flowing and you'll be getting this one in the saturated state. Whenever the voltage across this terminal or the base of the transistor is more than Vz plus Vbe, okay. So whenever it is more than the Vz plus Vbe, if everything is working fine in the embedded system, so no need to worry. When it falls below Vb plus Vz, at that time the base will be saturated and it generates a reset pulse which is active low. That is what is displayed there. So the transistor conducts always when the supply voltage is Vcc, which is greater than that of Vbe plus Vz, and the transistor stops conducting when the supply voltage falls below Vbe plus Vz. So because of this the transistor falls and the reset signal will be generated from the ground. So you will be using this circuitry which generates an active low signal to hold the voltage to one particular level. Then we need a very important one that is called oscillator unit. A microprocessor or a controller is a digital device which is made up of combination of sequential circuits. And the instruction execution of a microprocessor or a controller occurs in sync with the clock signal. So this oscillator unit is a device which generates clock signal to the processor. It will be either using a quartz crystal or it will be using a oscillator using a LC or RC combination, and then you will be getting the clock signal generator. So the quartz crystals and the ceramic resonators are equivalent in operation. They will give us the connection between, the generation of the clock signals to the system. So the speed of operation of the processor depends upon the clock frequency, and that depends upon this oscillators. So the total system power consumption will be directly proportional to the clock frequency always. So the accuracy of the program execution also depends upon the accuracy of the clock signal. So always it will be calculated as parts per minute, plus or minus parts per minute. Then oscillator unit, you will be having quartz crystals, or you will be having a capacitor and a resonators, or we will be having a crystal oscillators, or we will be using a oscillator unit to the microprocessor as well. Then to keep track of what is happening, we need a real-time clock. Okay, if we switch off our mobile, or if we switch off our laptop and then we switch it on, it will show us the correct time. That is because of this RTC. RTC which is responsible for keeping track of the time. It holds the time in terms of hours, minutes and seconds. Format one is 12 hours and the other one is 24-hour format. So there are many manufacturers, say Maxim Delas, ST Microelectronics and so on, which develop RTC for our embedded systems. It contains a microchip in the time and date related information, and it battery backup, small battery backup work in the absence of power or whenever it is switched off. Okay. So real-time clock, it is giving us a timing reference which is required for synchronizing operation of the OS. Then the RTC can be configured to interrupt the processor at a predefined interval, or it can be used to interrupt the processor whenever the RTC register reaches a specified value. Then one more component what we need is a watchdog timer. This is simply a watchdog. Watchdog means it keep on looking at your processor, and if the count misses, then it will generate a reset signal. So, depending upon the internal implementation, this timer whatever we have, this will have incrementing or decrementing counter, and it will generate a reset signal to reset the processor if the count reaches 0 for down counting or count reaches higher value in the up counting watchdog timer. So if the watchdog timer is in the enable state, the firmware to it before starting the execution of a piece of code, and then timer will start counting. Firmware execution does not complete due to malfunctioning or it is going into an infinite loop. At that time, the counter reaches maximum count and the counter will generate a reset pulse. The execution completes before the expiration, then the reset count watchdog timer will itself reset and the value of 0 will be loaded into its timer register. So most of the processors implement watchdog as a built-in component and some may be connected with external device. So microprocessor supervisors the IC DS1232 is a watchdog timer what is present in the present processors. So this has a free running counter and it has a microprocessor. Overloads or whenever it is reaching the maximum or when it reaches 0, it generates a signal on the reset pin. If execution is well in time, then the watchdog will be reset. And we need PCB and components to act as supporting devices for our embedded systems. In today's lecture, we have learnt about the embedded firmware and the other system components. Embedded firmware, we have learnt high-level language and assembly language. And in other system components, we have learnt about watchdog timer, our PCB designing or PCB components, real-time clock, as well as the reset circuitry and the brownout protection circuitry. So we'll meet in the next video.